Hello, how does it feel out there? I hope you and your relatives are in good health. My name is Jeroen Hanekamp. I'm the General Manager of DELMIA Quintic, and next to me on the other line is Camilo.
Hi, I'm Camilo Gaviria. I'm the Vice President of Technical Sales for DELMIA, and I'm going to be sharing with you and Jeroen a few moments and interesting information. So thank you.
Thanks very much, Camilo. Because wow, we are in a period of enormous change. So I thought today, let's put this into perspective and look at it from the angle of other changes. Let's look at what these changes are and how they are affecting our businesses and how Dassault Systèmes sees this and is helping companies transform. So what do we mean by disruption? Today's pandemic is a major disruption. We all know disruptions as a new business word used to refer to disruptors such as the Ubers and Teslas of the world. But what I want to talk to you about today is all the sorts of disruptions that you are actually facing, not only from the disruptors, but all the other things that are going on. So the first source of disruptions to your businesses, in fact, comes from this new form of market disruption. We all know of the impact of the disruptors that use a combination of technology and innovative people to enable many new opportunities and at the same time create threats for existing businesses. 36 of the top 50 disruptors on the CNBC top 50 list this year have valuations of over €1 billion. So this type of disruption is here to stay. And to confirm this, here we see industries being disrupted. The level of disruption on the vertical axis and those facing future or more disruptions on the horizontal axis. Bottom left are the industries which are less susceptible, and to the right are those who are already being disrupted but will face even more disruption. And the key thing here is that there are very few sectors which have less than a 50% chance of being disrupted. And these disruptors are creating products and services at an unprecedented rate and in new forms, meaning that the design, manufacture, and delivery of products and services is now done faster than ever before. And disruptors create two effects. One, those working for disruptive companies need a step change in order to disrupt. And two, other companies in the disrupted market may need to respond very quickly. So either way, your business will need to change, meaning you have to determine how, which means more activity in your company than business as usual. And the new COVID-19 has reminded us that companies need to plan and prepare for large-scale outbreaks of pandemics. Globally, supply chains are being impacted, and some companies are better prepared than others to mitigate the impact. And these successful companies have better ways to analyze their supply chain and components. Companies that are moving from a linear supply chain to a digital one are able to have fully end-to-end visibility, collaboration, responsiveness, agility, and optimization. And the key principle is to build a resilient supply chain that not only seeks to reduce risks, but also is prepared to quickly adjust and recover from any unanticipated supply chain disruptions that occur. Now, let's consider a second source of disruption: customers. Customers have also become more demanding and are now engaged more than ever before in shaping the products and organizations which create those products. A large dose of self-confidence in Generation Y and Z and their use of new technology has emboldened this demographic to influence company behavior. Managing corporate reputation on sustainability is the third highest reason for engaging in sustainability initiatives, and 50% of the companies are engaged in it, with 25% engaged in it as part of a staff retention program. So this causes companies to change their activities. And finally, customers are demanding sustainable products, less packaging, customized products, and more knowledge about what they're using. Social media has become a new source of consumer information and feedback and operates at unprecedented speed compared even to a recent past. So companies are having to respond more quickly. And let's consider a simple example where normal market pressure have intersected with customer demands. Here, we see the dramatic reduction in energy consumption by aircraft engines in the jet era, which is now 60 years old. And initially, this was driven by competition and cost savings, but now this has been joined by sustainability demands from a variety of sources. And the net effect over time is a 70% reduction in fuel consumption. So we see here that customers are impacting company activities. And note generally that these can be very positive disruptions. Companies like KLM that are facing less work than normal currently have created an initiative called Blauw Helpt, or Blue Supports, to help during this crisis, supporting those in more need. And now there is a third source of disruption. In Australia, in August, the government announced that no longer could any waste be exported, as this country was exporting 4.5 million tons per year. And this regulatory change will change the behavior dramatically in many, many industries. And businesses will have to reconfigure to produce less waste very, very quickly, disrupting business as usual. And in 2014, I worked for Quintic, which was a Dutch company, which was then acquired by Dassault Systèmes. And the following day, I awoke to find I had 16,000 new work colleagues, new processes, new organization to understand, new and dual systems. Everything changes, causing significant disruption. And in 2018 alone, over 50,000 mergers and acquisitions were made, which was reflecting an amount of more than 5 trillion euro. And lastly, but very far from least, and something that is in business leaders' minds right now, is that we have been going through and are still in a period of volatility, and will be facing a shift in world economic conditions. Accelerated by COVID-19, you may be affected by one of the trade disputes in play, or by one of the many trade agreements under consideration, meaning that if whatever occurs is to your advantage, you may need to rapidly figure out how to ramp up. Or, if you're less fortunate, how to protect your profitability in a lower demand market. 2 months ago, an explosion in the oil fields of Saudi Arabia dropped oil production by up to 7%. Waking up overnight, the price of a barrel of oil became far more expensive. And even more recently, Russia and OPEC could not agree on the pricing, resulting in a massive plunge in the oil price. And of course, the reason we are streaming. And a once-a-decade experience caused by the impact of the coronavirus. Waking up yesterday night, and first time in history, the price of a barrel of oil became negative, which means that one would pay you to get such a barrel in May. So, Camilo, what are some of the examples of how companies need to be ready to respond to these sorts of disruptive forces?
Well, let's take a look at a couple of examples. Have you and your business created a supply chain scenario for the existing crisis, for the current crisis? In many countries and in many industries, what we've seen is that companies do not have or did not have these scenarios prepared, right? And for example, if you take a look at pulp and paper, they were the first ones to perceive the peak in demand for toilet paper, right? And the toilet paper producers were unable to cope with the additional demand because their installed capacity was just not enough. So the type of examples of companies that we see are those who have been trying to achieve the capability of doing simulation and scenarios where they can preemptively explore, for example, multiple demand patterns, or if they expect a particular product line to be increased because of the crisis, and plan all their actions subsequently. And that planning has become more successful in those companies who have utilized the tooling that allows them to explore multiple different approaches to a particular scenario. So for example, increasing the amount of production as a ramp up, or if there's supply shortages, for example, outsourcing some of that production somewhere else. Those multiple scenarios allow these companies to react for the unavoidable uncertainty that crises carry on, right? So we will not be able to exactly predict what the crisis will be, but the companies now have a series of scenarios and a series of responses that allow them to very quickly and efficiently react, especially if they use a very accurate modeling of their supply chains. So they reflect their status quo very, very accurately. For example, you also see it on the services industry. Now that the airlines are under extreme pressure, we have the example of Southwest Airlines, for example, which not only was one of the major, if not the biggest, player in the Boeing 737 MAX issue, but also they, at the same time, achieved record profit throughout 2019, already when the crisis was affecting the industry. And the way they were able to achieve the shortage of supply, in that sense, the aircraft mated with the increase or decrease in demand, was by having a solution such as Quintic that provides them the ability to evaluate multiple different scenarios and be prepared with the right assumptions and the right actions to counter those scenarios. And I think that they have been very successful at exploring that flexibility and applying it to the current crisis. The combination of all those technologies and the vision to have pre-prepared scenarios and predefined strategies to react to certain situations is what we're seeing right now.
Okay, so seeing customers who know how to respond and making it part of their business is actually satisfying as they become more sustainable as well. In this case, with Southwest Airlines increasing their profits and running the risk of disappearing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. The fourth and final major category of disruption we are facing is through technology. And here's a list of just some of the technologies which are now available and being implemented. And part of the challenge is that ease of these technologies is not something that you can simply add to an enterprise like a new app. These are all core technologies, and today's CIOs are challenged with which of these will deliver the best support for their business. And this is also accelerating. We sequenced the human genome in 2004, which cost hundreds of millions of euros. And machines do that today, performing 18,000 sequences per year at 1,000 euros each. So you can see from this, we have disruptions coming at us from multiple directions, and they are rapidly increasing in each of these dimensions. So the question then becomes, are we simply going to find a way to cope, or position ourselves to take advantage of all these great opportunities?
Well, so that's what we've seen already in some industries. Has provided certain advantages. Large engineering companies, which took a leap of faith some years ago into the digital PLM, right, the digital twins and so on, have been very quickly reacting to the new demands for example, respirators. Some of these companies like GM, like the Teslas, the Rolls-Royces, have been required by their governments to support the local industry and the local supply of scarce ventilators, right? And these companies, because they had previously taken steps towards the digitalization, the digital twin of their production process, have been able to, in the span of weeks, share information, first of all, across entities. So it's not only one company who's doing this, it's actually a network of companies who are sharing knowledge to address the better good, right? And they've done that by sharing digitally. Plans of the respirators, the required materials, the bill of manufacturing, everything is now shareable for those companies across the different platforms that they have been working on for the past 10 years. So that's, for example, how a particular technology has enabled these companies to not only react better for themselves, but also to provide assistance beyond their immediate scope. And that's a definite disruptor in how we react to the crisis.
Okay, wow. And here at the System, we have believed for years that we are in the middle of the next industrial revolution, which we call the industry renaissance. You know, in 1760, there was this beginning of the industrial revolution, but the people at that time did not realize that this was so big, that 250 years later, the future generations would still be referring to it and still reveling in its success. And we are firm believers that we are in the middle of the next one, where people will be able to take maximum advantage of these disruptions, and far less limited than they have been previously, to increase the pace of innovation, which improves our society. However, finding the time to take the benefit is an elusive challenge. And it's not without coincidence that there is another change that is happening, making this the perfect storm, which has been driven largely by the adoption of mobile devices we all use across the entire society. And these devices have given people a new way of looking at how to use products. And this is even accelerated by the measures to work remote and from home taken by all governments globally to conquer COVID-19. Consider not long ago when you wanted to book a holiday, and you would have had an app from an airline, one from a car rental company, and a third one from an hotel agency. Or You would have to look at each hotel site. And this has dramatically changed now, where the airline side also allows you to book from numerous car rental companies and choose hotels. You no longer care about the products in the background linking this together. What you are interested in is the experience. How good is the experience? Now, your diary interacts with your phone, your camera interacts with your maps, your ability to interact with hundreds of stakeholders instead of one at a time means the experience of interacting is dramatically improved. And this is spread because the entire range of ages, demographic, everyone is exposed to this, and this has set the bar for experience much higher for everyone. We now live in the age of experience. And literally the day before the lockdowns were imposed on us, I transited through Schiphol Airport in Amsterdam. And Schiphol has a goal to make themselves the #1 airport in the world for customer experience using digital technology. And the experience of a passenger will be completely different from that of a pilot. So experiences need to be distinguished by roles. Equally, our customers expect to have good experiences using our software, and the experience of a demand planner will be different to that of a supply planner. Or a train controller will be different experience to that of a network controller. And also our customers want their customers to have good experiences using products and services. So software must support this by using simulation and optimization to ensure that the customer experience is good. So we provide our software to our customers as role-based experiences, pushing products to the background to support the workflows that people really execute. What this does is create challenges for us in this highly exciting, disruptive world, where people expecting good experience with everything we do. So Camilo, let's explain why we at Dassault Systèmes think we can help in this new and challenging environment.
Yeah, so for us, it's all about contributing in a world where everything is changing, right? And at Dassault Systèmes, we passionately believe that our ability to use the virtual world to optimize, improve, plan, design, before you even go into the physical world, adds enormous amounts of value, not only to companies, but to society in itself. Why? Because it reduces waste. It reduces the amount of time that we're spending in performing prototypes or full-blown projects, right? Whether it's in product design, in construction, in designing a new process for manufacturing something, or even virtualizing the human heart to exercise a particular surgery over and over again to achieve perfection before the surgery itself, is what we believe as Dassault Systèmes is the future and is what will drive the most amount of value for society. And what happens when you take that approach of virtualizing everything and performing everything in virtual before you go to reality? The first thing is we can model, when you take that approach, you need to model very accurately what you're going to do. So whether that's your supply chain, your heart, or your construction, your building, you have to model it extremely accurately because you need to make sure that it fits into reality when reality kicks in. Then you apply visualization. You need to be able to interact with that reality in the same way that you would in the real life. You need to add simulation because that's where the power of having the virtual world comes in. You can change pretty much anything and see how it reacts. And optimization to give you the answers that you're searching for and that you don't want to explore one by one. And by the way, those answers should be the best. Those capabilities to model, optimize, and simulate extended over the creation and the improvement of products, environments, positions, just even in ergonomics, will be enabling more and more waste reduction, time reduction, and ultimately a more seamless collaboration between the different value stakeholders in the supply network. That being said, I think that the earlier these companies are able to apply those virtualization capabilities and generate what we had just recently mentioned, the multiple potential reactions to a potential crisis, the better off and the more consistent that reaction, the more efficient that reaction will be in a situation such as the one that we're living today.
Yeah, you're hitting the nail on the head. And the expertise was built from our early beginnings as the leaders in 3D technology, achieving these milestones and expanding from our heritage in aviation into the diverse industries we just saw. So in 2012, we were the leaders, and the first true digital mock-up of the Boeing 777 was achieved using the Dassault Systèmes software. And as our product portfolio grew, we realized that not only did applications need to integrate on a single platform, but across products. People with different roles need seamless experiences through ensuring underlying integration of both data and process, and a new class of social business apps to facilitate the daily activities of everyone in a value network. And in doing so, we also extended into multiple industries, both along the traditional areas for us, such as aerospace and defense, but expanding the possibilities of virtualization to life sciences for virtualizing the human body, and megacities for virtualizing infrastructure and harmony within those cities, supporting our core belief of harmonizing products, nature, and life. Now, at Quintic, for the last 20 years, we have been modeling the real world and applying optimization to address the planning of operations environments. What is my demand plan? What is my production plan? What are the optimal truck routings for my optimal rosters for people? And when we joined the Dassault Systèmes in 2016, this expanded significantly. We see the world's operations environments have three major functions. The first of which is to set up the assets we need, such as our factories, production lines, warehouses, logistics depots, and this we call model, which is to virtually design and place assets and simulate and optimize how the factory or logistics center might operate before we build it, so we do it right first time. And once done, we need to plan the production of products or services, which is where DELMIA Quintic provides capability, where we optimize and create the best plan possible to make the product or provide the service. And now we need to finish up by performing the operations, where we can use the rich model of data to ensure that all real-time activities are monitored and acted upon, with a goal of, again, always being first time right. And here we are back in the manufacturing in a car assembly plant. And we call this joining the dots. And it enables us for the first time to use our virtual simulation and optimization technologies to represent this complete range of industrial activities and bring these together on a single platform. The 3D experience platform underpinned by a single business data model to provide the experiences for all stakeholders in our value network. So Camilo, can we give some examples of these?
Yeah, of course. And now we take it to the next level, right? So how can you also use this technology beyond the manufacturing context? And the example that you see on the screen right now is a very traditional use of our capabilities. So we're building a virtual twin of a construction site. We're literally building the building first virtually, and we're accounting for material availability, spatial constraints, shifts of people being available or not. And we're literally simulating the build of this particular building as the different components flow in. Then once it goes into execution, it's only about executing those instructions as they have been reviewed and analyzed and simulated and optimized in the virtual world. And what you see on the right side of the video is the execution of such a project following exactly that bill of construction as per the Dassault Systèmes solution. And what you see is that with this type of approach, we were able to evaluate a series of constraints that we would probably have at the entry of the trucks. And the overall result at the end of the day was a 30% reduction in the build time. And of course, also the reduction in ergonomic hazard, right? And ergonomic risk for the workforce. Because we were able to validate that certain, for example, heavy weights were lifted to a certain position such that the workers could access it in a more ergonomic way. So this is a very clear example of the value of being able to model that supply chain and that product first virtually, and then go into an execution mode. Mm-hmm. So if we take it more from a manufacturing perspective, so the execution part of that plan, of that virtual model, what you see on the screen right now is that with that virtual model, you're also able to actually take a look at how the execution of the process would look like, right? So in the past, it would typically have taken somebody to clock by the workstation and measure the time it takes to do a certain action. In the virtual world, all that data has already been parameterized. It's part of just the library of things that you have available. And basically, you can time literally your processes. You can design your processes, incorporate the variability, which is inherent to the human component, and define a working process that is both accurate, reflecting reality, and that it can be tested in several axes. So what happens if we move a particular tool to the left or to the right? The modeling of that execution allows you to capture much more information and do a more detailed analysis and leverage much more value that you would typically capture by just doing a manual clocking. So that ability to do it beforehand has provided enormous amounts of benefits. In the context of the current crisis, for example, we all know about these huge hospitals being created in China, which were modular, right? It turns out that those hospitals were designed to have steady airflow, a positive airflow, such that literally air is constantly pumping from the inside towards the outside, and thus rejecting or at least pushing away the possible contaminants. And that flow simulation it has been applied in the virtual world first to ensure that each individual component worked. But what's even better, that once assembled, the hospital as a whole would indeed have a positive net flow, and thus ensure low level of contamination within the new hospitals. Those type of examples are a very clear application of the power of simulation and modeling in the virtual world before even starting to execute. That hospital got implemented in 15 days, maybe 30. Yes. And by the way, it then was replicated in a subsequent city. So it also allows you to more consistently and robustly expand your processes.
Yes. Yeah, that's very impressive. And also linked to that, we need to consider that our stakeholder environment has changed dramatically as well. So we need to adapt and collaborate with the entire value network. And the value network, to repeat, can be described as all the social and technical resources which interact with your business, which can make a positive or negative difference to your profitability and theirs. And value networks are rapidly extending as technology reduces the constraints and relationships. And for example, rather than talking to 2 suppliers for a particular part, now there's a marketplace, and I can ask all suppliers in the world if they can provide that part. And a company which supplies machines for your production lines might be able to collaboratively put the drawings for the machine on a shared screen to discuss a particular problem, and they can be anywhere in the world. Consider the time lost when people cannot get the information or people they need at their fingertips to collaborate, to do the business functions they need. And we see the biggest challenge here, where customers are taking an isolated view of collaboration, where collaboration clearly needs to be totally integrated to the business apps and the underlying data model across those apps. And the value network enabling capabilities such as marketplaces to be utilized. Otherwise, yet another integration nightmare is liable to occur. So, Camilo, how do we facilitate collaboration in this?
Well, indeed, the Systems was very early aware of the need for collaboration solutions in the context of supply chain, but beyond that, PLM and in general business. As we all know, the social platforms have enabled enormous amounts of peer-to-peer collaboration, right? So person to person. But we're still quite significantly lacking in supplier integration and being able to talk with our supply chain stakeholders. Already in 2012, the Dassault Systems created the 3D Experience platform. It's a powerful business platform that integrates both business applications and apps, as well as personal and communication applications and apps. And this brings the social component and the business component into one sphere. This brings enormous amounts of value. Let's just imagine a couple of examples. In traditional PLM, you would typically develop a series of parts, and different engineers would work on different parts of a subassembly, and that subassembly would ultimately make it to a certain engine or something, right? At some point, these people are exchanging information about their concerns, their challenges, their questions. One part fits with a certain tolerance, but not with a certain other. And they would typically do all this collaboration via either phone or email at best, which generates a series of challenges in terms of traceability and the ability to follow up on what's happening, right? Now, imagine a world where that same part and all the sub-assemblies are not only created in the same app, which for consistency is fantastic, but they're also created in the same environment. I can pull up the current status of any of those parts at any moment in time. And by the way, I can also annotate and ask questions and directly in the same tool, in the same platform, interact with my colleague engineer and ask him for a particular requirement or suggest a particular change, and have all of that logged in a single source of truth, a single data model that then is shared by the entire company. Now, if you, on top of that, add the business layer, the fact that that same annotation, that new part might have a particular interest from a marketing perspective because it opens a new market segment or so on, then you can immediately see the value of the business and the social component. Marketing gets access to this new availability and can already have a glimpse at, for example, the first mock-ups and create a new campaign based on this. So that level of collaboration within the company has been enabled since 2012 in the platform. When you port that to the benefits that it brings into our supply chain collaboration, we immediately see the benefit already in the COVID crisis. Much of the challenges that we've seen so far has been purely around visibility and understanding who is able to do what. Can you imagine a world where all these stakeholders, suppliers of masks, suppliers of clothing, suppliers of textile, of ventilators, engineering firms, would be able to subscribe easily and provide visibility as to what capabilities they can offer to their local government, to a global organization, and in that central model be able to identify how to cope with certain shortages or certain challenges from a supply chain perspective. Everybody talking under the underlying data model under the same platform. That will significantly streamline communication, provide visibility to all stakeholders, and ultimately benefit the full of society. It's just a more efficient way of working things. And if you take that into a smaller scale or into even a larger scale, but at a private scale in the commercial business, this is what most companies are currently trying to achieve. Full visibility, understanding of the risks that coronavirus is bringing into their supply chains and into their businesses, and a clear set of data and collaboration tools to share that data efficiently across their staff. These are basic needs that all companies are struggling to a lesser or greater degree. And what we see is that the ones that are being more successful are the ones that are addressing these challenges in an efficient manner.
Yes. Yeah. Can we look at some more examples?
Yes. So when we bring this all together, you can definitely fit the entire story in four main pillars. We first model either the supply chains or the business or a particular part. Once we have that model, that representation of your reality, we aim at optimizing it. We have an idea of what it looks like. Now let's make it better, right? But once you have it, you need to at some point lock down your decision making and start executing. You need to perform it, and then you need to learn from it. So that's actually a cycle in itself. And once that's working, you want to be able to orchestrate it. And for orchestration, you need to collaborate, right? And this in itself is a cycle where you're going from the virtual to the real, and once you've executed, that provides you some feedback, then you go back to the virtual and do the whole process again. And you need a different set of capabilities in each. Again, what we mean by modeling in our world is not only the modeling of a supply chain, it's also, for example, the modeling of an entire production site, how to build the site itself that will in the end produce a particular product, how to set up the line, how many robots are we going to need, how do we position the different cells, are there dependencies, how do we evaluate the flow of material to make the most efficient layout of the site. And that's all on the modeling side. Now you've created that virtual environment. Now you can actually optimize it, make the mathematical optimization of, for example, also that layout, and then you perform it. Then you go and execute those instructions. You have your plans, and whether it's for a part, whether it's for a site, or whether it's for a business process, you have the set of instructions that are required to be executed. And if you follow those, 99% sure, you're still not going to hit 100% reality, because reality always kicks in. And it's your ability to do this cycle quickly and with the right set of tools that will enable you to be more efficient in the face of uncertainty. And from a Dassault Systems perspective, that's where we're clearly providing particular capabilities at each of these levels and in each of these pillars to support that end-to-end virtual versus real interaction.
Yeah, very helpful. So I want to focus on where we are in planning for this, because for the past 20 years, DELMIA Clinic has been creating these virtual environments by modeling real-world environments in data and then using optimization technology to deliver the best possible results. But let's just ask a simple question. As a world, how well do we plan today? Let's assume that you're planning a trip to the moon. I think we would all agree that the planning of the route is to be right, no exceptions. We cannot have a fuel burn that is almost right, and definitely the angle which we return into the atmosphere has to be absolutely correct. The why is obvious. Human lives are at stake. Now, let's consider planning for manufacturing and service operations. The fact is that we have been using systems for decades now that actually do not give the right answers, leaving significant waste of resources, both materials, time, labor, and energy, and the risk of dissatisfied customers. I wonder if this would be different if lives were at stake. And traditionally, the planning problem was not accurately represented. In manufacturing, for example, ERP systems did not do a proper virtual representation of the problem, let alone cater for the right planning rules. In logistics or workforce, often there were few systems available and they also did not represent the problem accurately. People resorted to Excel, but it also cannot represent the full set of constraints, nor execute the full set of rules needed. And when we see a lot of companies and they really try to represent the problem fully, we often find that they do not have the data, or the data they have can be very poor. Now, once you have the representation of the problem correct, there's only one real way of finding the best plan, and that's to use mathematical optimization. However, people have not done so. They have accepted that near enough is okay and employ technologies not capable of giving an accurate answer. Now, there were no human lives at risk here, so it was okay, but instead of lives lost, waste is produced. Orders are not fulfilled. People rosters aren't correct. Trains conflict. Trucks plans are approximate. And in these cases, a huge amount of time and effort is often being expended in execution to ensure that these things are fixed as best as possible. Often they are not. And the problem is simply too complex, which is why we see step changes and improvement in our customers when they solve the problem properly. Now, having the plan is fine, but this is where yet another form of disturbance is seen, which is operational disturbances, which are now larger and more frequent than ever. So replanning optimally for disturbances in execution can be difficult unless you can get the disturbance data into your planning environment real time and re-optimize quickly. However, and how, if you are operating in such an environment, can you find the time to invest in the opportunities offered by the disruptive forces I outlined earlier? And we believe that there's now an urgent need to ensure the take-up of these technologies. The pressure on the environment is spawning the circular economy as many of our materials are under threat or prices are increasing. And our population is increasing, the disruptive forces are increasing, and optimization technology exists, is proven, and can make three significant contributions. One, a significant positive impact to the bottom line of our value networks. Two, the reduction of waste in labor, materials, and energy. And three, utilize time to take advantage and manage the disruptive influences. Look at this simple example and the additional distance and the time and CO2 on the left compared to the optimized routes on the right. Trucks are being used more than necessary. So what is needed for companies to take this step to use this technology? We believe that most companies would not be able to answer this question. What is the opportunity gap between the way you plan today, where you produce a feasible plan, and the optimal plan you could be operating with? Can you? It's not an easy question to answer, except that not one of our customers has ever reverted from optimization once they employed it. So the returns are there, and now there is a greater need for efficiency to manage the disruption and also contribute to the global goal of improving our lives by minimizing all forms of waste in a finite world. It is the reason why we're seeing major companies such as Boeing, Severstal, DHL, Cibur, Outokumpu, LMK, and Metallo Invest transforming their planning to get this right. And many companies I'm talking to us also say, well, our data isn't right, or our planners won't understand it. And more companies are finally addressing the data issues, as when you use virtual concept, the data must be right. It must be rich, it must be right. And if lives are at stake, the data is right. But if not, does it make any sense? Camilo, can you give an example?
Yeah, so here's an example of exactly what you're talking about, the using our technology to do things right the first time, right? Yeah, so the first example, sorry for the delay, the first example is again the tactical route planning, and how by defining tactical routes, for example, some of these distribution companies have been able to reduce the CO2. It turns out that when you cluster some of these customers from 3PLs and 4PLs in a smart way, you're effectively having a direct impact not only on your bottom line, less mileage, less maintenance for the trucks, and less fuel, but you're actually having a positive effect on your CO2 footprint. And you're able to do it up front. So you're able, for example, in the context of the current crisis, simulate what amount of a fleet has to be enabled to reinforce, for example, home delivery, which has a series of constraints that are typically not handled by most 3PLs. That ability to do it preemptively is precisely what we're talking about of the first time right. That has enabled many of our customers to go to their stakeholders with direct solutions rather than trying to figure out what is the best way to service a particular customer or service a particular service request, distribution request that has never been tested before. And many companies and many organizations today are actually performing planning activities which they were not prepared to do so in the past. By how? Involving the usage of virtualization technologies that allow them to test it first in a virtual environment.
Yeah, and maybe, and that's actually what this slide is also about. There's one major factor that we have learned over time. Companies' planning processes are invariably very complex, and surprisingly so. And we believe that our customers will tell you that after making this journey, that it's a business transformation. And the way to think of planning changes. Now, you are focused on goals of the planning system and KPIs which must be achieved, whereas previously the focus is on making sure that data is there. And we have seen magnificently complex planning systems over the years, but after transformation, the process itself is faster and less error-prone, let alone the result. More speed, more accuracy, more agile, more time available for new initiatives.
Yeah, indeed. Some of the ways we're seeing that customers are taking up these transformations is mainly being restricted by the process silos, and what's avoiding them is the lack of integration between processes, right? One of the examples that we have to address those silos and to address those non-integrated processes has been the deployment of the DELMIA Quintic optimization solutions and the DELMIA Priso MES solution, where we're literally breaking the silo not only between planning and execution, which allows a very streamlined communication between what's going to happen and how to actually make it happen, but it also has enabled the collaboration between the planning domain and the shop floor, for example, because now the shop floor gets more information around the schedule, and there's a more dynamic exchange of information between what's happening now and what's supposed to happen in the future. The perfect alignment between both systems also ensures that there's a lot less rework. Most of the rework is already evaluated at planning level within Quintic, and once it's sent to a Priso, the confidence level that that work order, that particular task is actually going to happen, is extremely high. So the shop floor has gained confidence in the plans being generated, and that's a symbiotic type of relationship that only benefits the overall performance of the shop floor in the organization.
Yeah. So let's look at another form of disruption and we can address that. It's 9 a.m. on Monday morning at a major aircraft manufacturer, and they have generated the optimized schedule for the next 2 weeks of production. Looks good. And it's 10 a.m. and the engine supplier has advised of delays to delivery in week 2. Rerun the schedule. It's 10:30 and a tool jig has broken, stopping a line. Rerun the schedule. Or maybe we're at the logistics provider delivering parcels, or an air traffic controller, or a rail provider. All of these industrial and service operations have constant disruptions which prevent the plan from being executed. So, Camilla, what is the next evolution of our solutions to solve this type of day-by-day operation problems?
Yep. So what you see right now is that with the advent of the IoT, the Internet of Things, and very low-cost sensors, so the semiconductors pretty much replacing every single sensor out there at a very low price. The amount of data that has become available in the edge, so where computing stops and physical world starts, is enormous. We're nowadays able to capture terabytes of information in milliseconds of time, and what will happen is that that amount of information will require planners to stop thinking in terms of planning runs or milestones. No, the world is continuous, and the expectation from customers has become continuous. When you go into a website, you want to know what's the next available train, not the one that's going to be available tomorrow. In fact, you're probably late, so you want to know what's the next available train in the next 15 minutes. So real-time integration and the real-time flow of this information will require a different paradigm to planning. You can no longer create plans. You need to continuously be planning. Information flows in, optimal and efficient plans come out at the same speed. So literally, instead of generating a plan or waiting up to a certain hour to create a full plan, you're basically just confirming the next set of events that should happen in the next few hours, while still keeping a high-level overview of your entire plan for the next few weeks, months, and so on to do your strategic planning. But that concept of continuously optimizing as per request and making sure that every decision that you make is optimal, but on a continuous basis, is one of the key shifts that we're going to be facing in the next few years, if not already now.
Yeah.
So when we take the entire model, optimize and perform a picture into account, we have to choose where we're going to start, right? So where we're going to nibble on the edges. Otherwise, it's just too big of a monster. You cannot jump from A to Z on one jump. And it's going to be very specific for your business, how you're going to do the business transformation. And again, business transformation does not happen for the sake of business transformation. It's ultimately driven from a purpose. And also, business and digital transformation is not about replacing an existing process by a tool, right? It's what was the original purpose of having that process in the first place, and what tool or series of tools or processes or even organizations are required to provide a digital support that provides all the known values and all the known capabilities and benefits of the virtual world, of the digitalization of the action. And again, defining whether your goal is tactical, operational, or strategic, whether you need to begin with the just modeling, or whether you're mature enough that you already have a model, maybe you just want to move into synchronization, will lead into which part of this path to excellence you need to start with. Every business is in a different part of the path, and what's key is to recognize what are your strengths and the weaknesses that you've set out to address, and ultimately, what is the goal of the business transformation that you're planning?
Yes. So what we have introduced to you today is that we live in a changing, disrupted world, and that we have as our mission to help to create a more sustainable world. And if we use the techniques we have discussed, we can make a difference. And together we can improve your world and the world we live in through the use of these technologies to address through business transformation the challenges of our time. Come and join us. And thank you. You can reach out to us with your questions to delmia.covid19@3ds.com. And many thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much.